is a local figure in his community's fight for civil rights. West News' Gail Pascal-Brown joins us in studio with more. Hey, Gail.
Hey, how you doing, Stuart? One of Ocala's own, Reverend Leroy Johnson, was recognized this evening as a trailblazer during the civil rights movement. The young and the young at heart attended the ceremony at the Howard Academy Community Center in Ocala. From 1967 to 1998, Reverend Leroy Johnson owned a restaurant, 2 gas stations, a construction company, and was a local pastor. Though the target of civil and racial unrest, Reverend Johnson's son says his father never hesitated to help the black community. Johnson assisted African Americans in starting their own businesses.
When they could not get a loan from the bank, he had a bank attached with Barnett Bank. He would get loans from Barnett Bank and help other people get cleaners and other restaurants here in Ocala, secretly. And I mean secretly. Nobody didn't know nothing about it.
According to the Marion County Sheriff's Office, this is a picture of then Sheriff Doug Willis, who served from 1961 to 1973, giving businessman Leroy Johnson a sheriff's deputy badge. Last year, Ocala Mayor Kent Quinn commended Reverend Leroy Johnson for his efforts posthumously for the significant contribution he made as a civil rights advocate. Back to you two.
Good afternoon, Westport. I'm Maggie Blander. Today is November 19th, 2021, and you're watching The Report. The Black History Museum of Marion County has reopened its doors. Let's go to Alex with more information.
In the Howard Academy Center, there's a small room filled to the brim with Black history of Ocala. To start off, Miss Cynthia Rosengram says a few words about the museum.
I'm going to briefly talk to you about Paradise Park and some of the history that we have here in the museum. Obviously, we only have this one room, and this is just a start. Hopefully, we can grow to more spaces into a larger location. But as you look around the wall, this is a piece of history, no matter how you look at it.
For those of you who don't know, Paradise Park was a colored-only attraction. Then, Miss Thelma Edwards, the oldest living relative of Emmett Till, spoke a few words on what she wants to see in the future.
I was really glad to see everyone gathered together and working on equality, unity, that we could love one another more than we do.
Mr. Larry Johnson, the son of the first Black Marion County Sheriff, talked about everything his dad did and what he went through.
To 1984-85. Then he got rid of that gas station, but in the meantime, while he had that gas station, he was helping out other black people who couldn't get loans from banks back then in the 70s and 80s because they wouldn't allow black people to get loans. But my dad had a business that was attached to a bank that was collateral. So he would go up there and get loans with his business, like $4,000 or $5,000, and give the people to start their own business. He was a pillar of the community. During the 70s, he would also buy kids school clothes before school started that lived around his gas station, and he would buy them clothes, book bags, and stuff like that. He did that about for 4 years at that gas station. So he did a lot for this community, and what I want to see from this community, I want to see the black people in this community, and especially in Ocala, that have a unity, a togetherness, and they help each other out. When you see one person down, another person should be able to lift that person up. That's the bottom line. And that.
I would like to thank everyone who's a part of it and ask you to go out to the museum.
This has been an 8-year project for Larry Johnson and his family, learning about just how involved his father was in shaping the city of Ocala. But Johnson says it wasn't easy on his father, Leroy.
He was born in 1938. And then you grew up in a time of Jim Crow, segregation, back then where blacks weren't even allowed to look at a white person.
Leroy Johnson owned a restaurant, 2 gas stations, opened his own construction company, and was a pastor. Throughout his life, he faced discrimination.
One morning he went there, all his windows was broken, and nothing wasn't stolen, and the N-word was sprayed on the side of the gas station saying, "Get off a pine." N-word.
But Johnson says that didn't stop his father from helping others. He would take out loans in his name so others could start their own businesses. And he was one of the first black sheriff's deputies to lead in Marion County.
And this is when he got his badge
when they gave it to him, when he went through the training and everything.
Leroy was honored by Ocala Mayor Kent Gwynn in March. A documentary was even made to showcase all that he had done. But Larry says this isn't the end.
People are reaching out to me now. They want to do a movie about my dad. So yeah, they want to take the documentary now and turn it into a movie. It's going to be the next step. It'll cover everything that happened in Ocala. It'll cover the situations of the church in Raleigh and the churches he had in Gainesville too. People in Gainesville know my dad.
It's a legacy that will live on not only in Marion County, but across North Central Florida and maybe even the nation. In the Ocala Bureau, Julia Laudy, TV 20.
You couldn't go to a restaurant and sit down and have a meal. You couldn't try on clothes at a department store. When my mother, for example, attempted to buy shoes for us, we could not try on shoes. She would have to take a piece of paper and trace our feet and present that to the attendant at the store, and they would use that to try and match us up with the correct size of shoes.
What happened is my friend,
Sheriff's deputy and community activist, was honored tonight at the Black History Museum in Ocala. TV 20's Taylor Simpson tells us about the impact he has made on the Ocala community.
Many people I spoke with say Reverend Leroy Johnson fought for the civil rights of everyone, and he was recognized tonight for all his contributions to Marion County. The late Leroy Johnson had many titles: father, reverend, pastor, sheriff's deputy, and business owner. He was honored and remembered for all of them.
My dad helped out people who really couldn't help themselves. And he made them, when they were scared, when it was time for them to be scared, he proved to them there's no reason to be scared.
Johnson was faced with racism and harassment by the KKK just for owning a gas station. His sheriff's deputy uniform, badge, gun holster, and pictures will be placed in the museum.
He had death threats on his life. They followed him home and left letters on his cars.
At the ceremony, Lizzie Jenkins, the president of the Rosewood Foundation, was honored.
Our kids will not understand. We must keep them informed, encourage them to know who they are. Unless you know where you came from, you do not know where you are going.
Lynching victim Emmett Till's oldest living cousin was also honored and is still fighting against racism.
The color of our skin doesn't matter. God made us all, and He has a plan for us. And if we could just follow that plan, we'd make it to the mountaintop.
Historic memorabilia from Johnson, along with other Black Marion County residents, can be seen at the museum. In Ocala, Taylor Simpson, TV 20 News.
But she's grateful to hear from complete strangers and how she hopes to accomplish as a role model in our 1 hour special. It's Black History Month special. You can watch it right now on clickorlando.com/Black History Month. Very inspiring. NASA leaders are monitoring.
Here's Alex with a recap of what happened last week at the Black History Museum.
Thanks, Freddie. At the Howard Academy Center inside their main building is where they house their Black History Museum. This room is filled to the brim with Black history of Ocala. Since this month is Black History Month, they had, last week on Thursday, a Black History program. The program started with Miss Davita Randolph, thanking all the people who have helped bring the history of the Black community in one area, and so anyone, young or old, can come and learn about the rich and fruitful history of the Black history of Ocala. And I would like to thank everyone who is involved in the event for allowing me to come and experience this and help bring more awareness to the history of our area. The program then went on to give out the National Civil and Human Rights Award to Ms. Lizzie Robinson Jenkins, a dedicated individual who has tirelessly been trying to find out what really happened during the Rosewood Massacre, and as well as Miss Thelma Edwards, a woman who has fought for years against racism and discrimination just to hope that for the years to come, we can rid ourselves of these oppressions placed on people of color. There was also many things that happened, from Mr. Larry Johnson honoring his father's legacy. He told us about his father's lifetime of helping others in the Ocala area and how he faced discrimination and racism, but overcame
He tells us what Jim Crow meant.
Jim Crow was a system of segregation, essentially, separate economic, political, social systems within a community and throughout the nation. And it simply meant supposedly separate but equal after a while, but somehow the equal got lost.
For more than a century, members of a North Central Florida church kept the legacy of their history alive. And TV 20's Taylor Simpson tells us how they remembered their 130th anniversary.
This church behind me was wooden even in the 1970s, and members celebrated its history and its 130 years of existence. Since 1892, New Zion AME Church in Raleigh has been a safe haven for people to worship for years.
There wasn't even no building. They was just praising God in the woods, something then later on in a tent, but basically hiding in the woods to worship God from the racist separatism that they had back then.
Even in the 70s, this church was wooden and falling apart. And Thomas Day Sr. remembers when former pastor Rev Leroy Johnson turned it into what it is today.
This church was stored out of these windows after it was built, piece by piece.
As the church celebrated all its years by prayer and singing, Johnson's son remembers what his dad did for the community.
We had to deal with people trying to run them off the road just to get to church back in the early 70s. So it was a lot of racial tension even on the way to church on Sunday mornings.
And the current pastor wants his legacy to live on.
And they went through some hard struggles, and they made the way for us. And we gotta continue to go forward. We celebrated for keeping us during those hard times.
And they hope the church lives to tell its history for 130 more years. In Raleigh, Taylor Simpson, TV 20 News.
What a beautiful
community. You're right, son. I mean, I certainly wouldn't argue with you on any of those points that you've made. It's quite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Larry, and I'll definitely listen.
Thank you, young brother.
On the platform, so.
No problem. Thank you.
And
but keep up what you're doing. The community needs to be alerted to exactly what you're alerting them to. And one of the things I know happens is when a community pays attention to something like this. You don't want mob justice, but when attention is paid, everybody gets on their P's and Q's and starts paying attention to what they're doing so they do what they're supposed to do.
Some believe that Johnson has been brushed off because he was a powerful black man ruling an entire neighborhood of. However, in recent decades, Johnson's story has started to reach more people thanks to film and television. Out his final years in the neighborhood he once ruled. Though Johnson's story may have been cast aside by some in the years after his death, it's clear that he will never be completely forgotten.
You got to realize, from a historical perspective, the black church was the Walmart of the black community. What I mean by that, if you was hungry, they fed you. Unemployed, they got you a job. Ku Klux Klan burning crosses on your lawn, they gonna go see them. Shootout, the church is there with the guns. You need to bury somebody, they had the death insurance. Your child needed education, they got the school. You feel me? The black church was the one-stop shop for everything black people needed, from their revolutionary needs to their political needs to their spiritual needs. Compare that to the black church today.